Good evening, church. Imagine the chaos that's on a battlefield. Imagine what it's like to be marching under the load of a pack to the point where you're just getting so tired. Those are the reasons that we in the Army have a thing called the Fife and Drum Corps. The drum, from the beginnings of having a military, were used to give instructions out to the field, a way of breaking the chaos with the rhythms of a drum. And then the fife, a sound that's able to pierce all the things that are going on in the battlefield and convey specific orders. It's why we have the fife and drum today. But they also entertain. And when soldiers were on a long, long march under heavy pack, under incredible conditions, many of them shocked by what they had just witnessed or been a part of, it was the fife and drum that bolstered their morale, that allowed them to keep marching. When I heard that the U.S. Army Fife and Drum Corps is going to come here, to our church, to our city, there is no place I'd rather be. You're in for a treat. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. The U.S. Army Old Guard Drum and Fife Corps.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Staff Sergeant Mason Rarapaw. I'm a bugler and a trumpet player with the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, and we are members of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. The Fife and Drum Corps is one of the Army's 4 premier bands stationed in Fort Myer, Virginia, just across the Potomac from Washington, D.C. The primary mission of the Corps is to support ceremonies and special events in the National Capital Region, but as well, we also get to come out on tour and present public performances and master classes, public outreach performances. The Corps is known as the escort to the president, so anytime there's a foreign dignitary or a head Army arrival coming, we are there at those ceremonies on the White House lawn. The Corps performs on modern reproductions of historic instruments. As you may imagine, these historic field instruments can be quite loud, and in a space like this, prepare yourself for some loud volume, okay? I'll just put that warning out front. We play on 10-hole fifes, rope tension drums, and modern 2-valve bugles, I'll say, which you'll hear a little bit more about why we have those in the fife and drum corps a little later. Another question, these are not British uniforms. I know the redcoats, right? So these uniforms are patterned after the uniforms musicians of George Washington's army would have worn. Back then, Washington's soldiers, the commander-in-chief's guard, wore blue coats with red facings. So the musicians, in order to be easily identified on the battlefield, would wear the reverse colors of what their parent infantry unit would wear. Thus, his musicians would have worn red coats with blue facings. Tonight's program features a through line of the early American sound. That's going to take shape of several different types of ensembles. Each ensemble will introduce their work, give you a little bit of context about what you'll hear in the program, and give you a little history as to why that music was composed or written and how that fits into the early American sound. We're going to start the program tonight with a work by James Stevenson, a modern American composer, primarily for brass and orchestral music. And that's entitled Fanfare for an Angel. So here's our modern trumpet ensemble on Fanfare for an Angel.
That'll work. Hello. So the next piece on our program is going to feature fifes and drums. And as was mentioned a little bit at the beginning of our program, these two instruments were used primarily as field instruments throughout, honestly, centuries of European history and countries far beyond Europe. We can date many of our calls back to the Swiss mercenaries that were used in the 16th century and were hired out by other countries to go and essentially share their military tactics, and fife and drum made its way along with those soldiers. So our next piece is a 20th century fife and drum composition. It's a competition medley, but it's comprised of a lot of 18th century tunes. Tunes such as Rule Britannia, British Grenadiers, Red, White, and Blue, Oyster River Hornpipe, Lexington, World Turned Upside Down, and Yankee Doodle. And this medley was made popular by the Charles T. Kirk Fife, Drum, and Bugle Corps. They were around from 1899 through the 1950s, and they were known for their mix of ancient, as we call it, which is essentially Spirit of 76, and modern style, which involves some kind of more modern drumming and a little bit of a faster tempo. So you'll definitely hear that with this piece. This corps played a pivotal role in uniting a lot of the New England styles of fife and drum that were around past fife and drum exited military usage, and this medley features drum drum parts by a famous drummer, at least to us, Eric Perelou, who was an instructor for the corps, and harmonies by John McDonough, who was a veteran himself. So we hope you enjoy Old English and Yankee Doodle.
My name is Staff Sergeant Jenna Vaverka. I've been in the Corps for about 2 years, and this is Staff Sergeant Mason Rurapa. They didn't have microphones in the Revolutionary War, so you'll have to forgive me here. There we go. I'm going to share a little bit about the trumpet and the bugle's role in the Revolutionary War. Yes, those are actually two different instruments. This is not a herald's trumpet, and the name bugle and trumpet have been used very interchangeably, so it's actually been really hard to trace accurate historical documentation of what was used when and where and why, but I'll try to add a little bit of clarification since I know you're all dying to know. I have here a natural trumpet, also called a Baroque trumpet, which was developed in Europe in the 1590s, and they made their way from primarily Britain, but also Spain and France, to the early American colonies in the early and mid-1600s. By the time of the Revolutionary War, we have quite a bit of documentation and accounts of how they were used. They would have been performed by military musicians performing at concerts in their local communities, could have been used in religious services as entertainment during theater productions, perhaps at intermission, sometimes on balconies in public ballrooms or gardens, and in opera bands and orchestras. The piece we just played is titled Minuet. Minuets were stately and dignified dance tunes developed in the French courts during the 1600s. While this particular minuet was written later in England in the 1760s, it certainly is very similar to the type of entertainment music you would have heard in the early American colonies, because like so many of our civic and social practices, many of our musical practices were borrowed from Europe as well. This piece could have been played as pre-ceremonial music before a military function, or even danced to by George Washington himself. We actually know that Washington believed music held great importance in both the military and life at home, which he made quite clear in a few of his general orders. He mentions music, fifers, drummers, and trumpeters specifically. But like you probably imagine when you first see this instrument, yes, they were used for more heralding, fanfare purposes, and were used as signal instruments. Like the fife and drum, their primary role was to instruct soldiers when it was time to do a certain action or duty. Obviously, their directional shape made it very easy to communicate out in the field. But while fife and drum were used for foot infantry units, trumpets were used on horseback and cavalry units, and they were actually used in dragoon units, which were sort of like our modern-day special forces teams. We're going to play now a call, Draw Swords, which could have been used in battle in the moment to demonstrate the full capabilities of the Baroque trumpet. As you can hear, it draws attention very easily, but unfortunately was not very practical to carry around, especially on horseback. So we quickly adopted the German and British practice of using a small coiled horn, a hunting horn, also called a post horn, to communicate and play signals. There were a couple of different versions of these bugles. Some were bent into a U shape with a strap across the middle to make it even easier. We used all the resources available, so there were all kinds of trumpets out there in the fields, even sometimes conch shells, if you can imagine that, when trumpets or bugles were not available. After the Revolutionary War, the bugle actually became the primary field instrument, even over the drum, sorry drummers, because of its ability to communicate and practicality. They were still used in cavalry units, but also used to regulate the day in camp alongside the fifes and drums. We'll now have Sergeant First Class Nichols demonstrate a call on a replica of a somewhat Civil War era bugle, and I think this is one that you'll know. Name that bugle call if you know it. Reveille, yeah, educated audience, awesome. Due to the rapid development in instrument technology during the early 1800s, trumpets changed quite a bit and became very popular not only in civilian brass bands, but the military as well. With the invention of keys, we saw the keyed bugle, and with the invention of the valve came cornets. As exciting as these new instruments were, and more melodic instruments were, the valveless bugle still remained the primary military field instrument throughout the 1800s up until World War II. Today, the bugles we use in the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps are custom made with 2 valves, which allows us to play more melodies and harmonies, which you'll hear in our final performance on the program, while still preserving, though, the look of the military bugle. While we're very thankfully not playing on horseback anymore as modern buglers in the Army today, our roles are still quite ceremonial. One of the greatest honors and traditions we get to be a part of are funeral ceremonies when we sound taps for a fallen veteran. Our unit also performs at many other military events and ceremonies in the Military District of Washington region, including venues such as the White House and the Pentagon. But a unique facet of our job today is the many small teams that highlight the talents and skills of the members that work behind the scenes of our performances. We would now like to play a piece for modern trumpets composed by one of our very own buglers, Master Sergeant Brooks Stevens. Written to honor all service members for their contributions to the U.S. military and our country, this piece highlights the selfless promise every American soldier makes. Please enjoy Guardians of Freedom.
Let's hear it one more time for those awesome buglers. All right, good evening. My name is Staff Sergeant Mike Serra. I am a bass drummer for the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. I'm joined by these two fantastic snare drummers, Staff Sergeant Christian Rodriguez and Staff Sergeant Phil Andrews. We all come from varying backgrounds, just like the rest of the drum line. There's about 7 bass drummers and 10 snare drummers at our unit. The reason there's so many is because we can go be tasked for missions like this, go all over the country, and still maintain our op tempo, our mission load back home. So just for a moment, I'd like to talk about the construction of our drums. You might have noticed that they're set up a little bit differently from, say, ZZ Top's drum set player. I had to. So modern drums are what we call rod tension. You'll see screws going all the way around the drum. Well, here, it's very minimal hardware, we call it. Just some feet for when you set it down so you don't tear up the hoop, and some carry hooks. The reason for that is we have one continuous strand of rope going all the way around the drum, which makes it very frustrating to maintain sometimes, because if you want to change the playing surface, you got to undo the whole thing. But it's all right, because they sound awesome. It's like a piece of furniture. It's like an heirloom. So speaking of how beautiful this thing is, this is all hand-painted. Every one of our drums is hand-painted, handmade, by actually an alum for the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. His name is Dave Loyal. It's made by Loyal Drums, and he spent 15 years playing bass drum for the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. He got out, decided, I'm going to build some drums. It's a single ply of ash wood. The reason we chose ash is, although you might not be able to tell with how echoey it is in here, the ash wood is a warm, throaty punch. It gives us the articulation that we need to be able to cut through on the battlefield, maybe. But the style of music that we play is very dense rhythmically. So you need to be able to hear every individual stroke. So the drums, the shell helps with that. So this next piece that we're going to be playing was actually written in-house. All of our drum solos, all of our bugle features, fife features, they're written by our production staff. It's a team of about 7 or 8 soldiers, and they all get together and they figure out some melodies to arrange, and inevitably there has to be a drum solo. So we're going to play one of those for you. It's called Evolution. The reason it's called that is because the drumline was going through a period in the 80s of trying to push the boundaries of the repertoire, using stylistic influences from some of the competition groups of the day. So while we are playing rope drums, we like to pepper in a little bit more modern repertoire. So you'll hear that. It's written by Staff Sergeant Brian Pentney and Ross Andrews in 1987. This is Evolution.
My name is Staff Sergeant Faith Santucci. I'm a fifer in the Corps, and I've been playing the fife for about 2 years now with this group. Our next piece is a triptych, or collection of 3 pieces arranged as variations on a theme, and it centers around the traditional Irish waltz, As the Sun Was Setting. This piece has been special to the Old Guard Fife section for many years, as we've arranged it as a fife solo in shows spanning 4 decades. The presentation we are playing today, arranged by Sergeant First Class retired Crystal Lee from our fife group, is a modern adaptation of John Chalia's fife trio arrangement of the same tunes. Sergeant Lee's arrangement uses fife, piccolo and C flute, and alto flute on the bass line. This unique expansion of the range of Mr. Chalia's trio creates different textures and tone colors within the ensemble, while still remaining in the folk idiom that the tune was sourced from. John Chalia, who I just mentioned, is a renowned fifer, collaborator, arranger, and teacher. He's a flutist as well as a fifer, and he has elevated and expanded the repertoire for the fife and fife ensemble through numerous concert pieces and arrangements. He has explored the fife's harmonic possibilities more than most, and among some who grew up in those circles, he is considered the fife community's equivalent to Bach. As we do this next piece, we have Sergeant First Class Aaron McHale, Staff Sergeant Shannon Moore, who is an MTSU alum, and Sergeant First Class Emily Barone.
Our final piece on the program before we transition to our marching element is titled Cedar and Birch. So this piece is especially special to us because it was commissioned by the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps back in 2021. The melodies were written solely for this piece. They were composed when we requested, by Mr. Greg Bacon, who is a multi-instrumentalist, arranger, composer, you name it, but most importantly, a fifer. So he is renowned in our Fife community, and we were so honored that he decided to write these melodies for us. And his dynamic duo partner, John Chalia, arranged the harmonies, and then we composed a drum score in-house by our very own Sergeant First Class Kevin Dill. So according to Mr. Bacon, I quote, "I wanted to write something that felt mostly positive and hopeful given the challenges the world has been through during the last couple of years. As such, I was looking for a title that was optimistic, something that was healing and hopeful. I had read that cedar trees are sometimes thought of as a symbol of healing and birch trees a symbol of hope. I don't know how true all that is, but that was my intent. Healing and hope, cedar and birch. Once on the tree theme, I just rolled with it."
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sergeant First Class John Parks. I'm one of the 2 full-time drum majors with the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. Just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I want to thank First United Methodist Church, all of you for having us, especially Wendell and Deanna Little. We also got to play at Middle Tennessee State earlier today. We got to do some master classes for some of their studios, but also play for a few of their bands. Got to do the show that you're about to see right now. We got to play that for them and answer some of the questions and show them what a life with music, a job in music can look like, but also service in the military, what it can look like in maybe a way that they hadn't seen or thought of before. What you're about to see is our small team show. It's going to take all 12 people. It's going to be a little bit different than what you just witnessed. That was chamber music. This is going to include the marching element that that you saw a little bit of in the beginning, but one of the things that we take pride in the Fife and Drum Corps is our marching. We also perform in many parades throughout the year. We do a show that's maybe twice as big as the one you're about to see in much bigger spaces, maybe a football field or a large basketball court. But one of the most frequent things we do is military ceremonies. So that's about a quarter of the performances that you will do in a career or in a year are different military ceremonies. Every single month you can guarantee that we're going to play at a retirement ceremony for different military members, all the way up to a state arrival on the White House lawn. That's going to happen actually on Wednesday, coming up next week. We're going to be playing for the arrival of the Prime Minister of Japan. He's going to come to the White House, and we're going to be there on the south lawn of the White House playing as he arrives for his state visit. We also get to play in elementary schools for 4th grade classes that are learning about Virginia history and get to show them what military music looked like. So it's a very vast range of different performances that we get to do, but we love every single one of them, and we especially love getting to come here and play for you guys tonight. So we're going to stick around afterwards. If you have any questions, please feel free to come and talk to us. That's one of my very favorite things about this job, is getting to interact with the people that we get to play for. So please, if you have any questions or would just like to talk with us, we will be spread around the sanctuary for however long they'll let us stay here. We're not going anywhere tonight. So please enjoy. This is like I said, our small team show. It's 4 parts. Part 2 will feature our Fife group. Part 3 will feature the bugles and the drums, and Part 4 will showcase our troop step, what we're going to do for the president next week, but what we also do as a part of every single one of those military ceremonies when we're rendering honors to military dignitaries. So we hope you enjoy. Please feel free, if you'd like, to applaud in between each section. Sometimes people are a little hesitant, but feel free to do that. So we hope you enjoy, and then stick around after. We'd love to speak with you. Group attention.
At ease. I know what you're thinking. I've got to get one of those uniforms. You know, they've played for royalty. They've played for heads of state. And they've played for the young soldier who is far away and doing this nation's bidding. And what's spectacular about that is that every performance is the same. It doesn't matter whether you're a head of state, royalty, or a young private. They're there. They're always excellent. And they're soldiers. When 9/11 occurred, they were doing a rehearsal. Many of them took off their uniform, put away their instruments, and they moved to the sound of the guns that were at the Pentagon. They've been in harm's way. They are extraordinary musicians. But they're my family because they're extraordinary soldiers. Let's give them a round of applause. You guys make an old soldier's chest rise with pride. Thank you so much.
All around, please come up. Thank you very much.